Hello, and welcome to Greening Nevada. I'm Donna Walden from Greenup, and I am your show host. As part of the program, we invite experts and visionaries in the field of sustainability. It is our hope that everyone will be inspired to take action to preserve our planet. Today, I have a very special guest, Patty Moen, who is recycling coordinator for the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, Sustainable Materials Management Group. Patty, I'm delighted to have you here today. Can you give us an idea of what it is you do for the state of Nevada and how it benefits the state?
So I am the Northern Nevada Recycling Coordinator, and we also have a Southern Nevada Coordinator in Las Vegas. So one of the things that I do is to calculate the state recycling rate. Some other things we do are we do a lot of education and outreach. We attend events, or we used to back in before COVID. We used to attend events, like Earth Day or the ACES Environmental Education Days for the ACES baseball team in Reno, or any events like that. Silver Springs does a fall festival every year, so we go and do outreach and education at these events, or we go into classrooms and talk to kids of all ages, from elementary school to college students. So I also answer the recycling hotline. So anytime if someone has questions on where they can take some, batteries or motor oil or all kinds of electronic waste. We get a lot of questions on TVs, or if they have leftover paint, things like that. I answer the recycling hotline, or actually these days I call you back since we're working remotely. We work with lots of nonprofits, local governments, service providers to help get the word out about diverting waste in the state. And I actually write reports and things like that. So right now I'm actually working on a report to the Legislative Council Bureau that we submit prior to the legislative sessions. So kind of summing up what's happened since the last time the legislature met.
Well, thank you, Patty. It's really nice to know what you do. You do a lot. And I know that you had a life, a long history in sustainability. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, about some of your previous roles in sustainability, who you are, and why do you care about the environment?
I guess I like to tell a story about when I first moved to Nevada. So my father was in the military, and when he retired, we got to choose where to move, and we decided to move to Nevada because he had a couple of sisters that lived here. And one of my uncles had a gas station in Reno, and so I was 14 years old, and we were visiting him at the gas station, and he said, "Let's go dump some tires." And so he and I went out till Mustang was actually the dump then, back in the 1970s, and we drove out and we dumped a load of tires on the side of the road, and which was the place that you dumped tires then. And he had me get out of the car, and he picked some sagebrush and had me smell it, and he said, "This is sagebrush." And so that was my introduction to Nevada, was sagebrush and dumping tires. And so it's kind of been a long journey since then, but I went to school at UNR and I studied biology. And after that, I worked at the Desert Research Institute as a lab tech and a field technician for several years. And then I went back to school and actually wrote my, at UNR again, and I wrote my master's thesis on increasing recycling in Washoe County. And so I've been working in the field for quite a number of years. And so back then we didn't have curbside collection of recyclables. We had drop-offs, and one of the things I did for my thesis was to map all of the drop-off locations in the Reno Sparks area. So we had, back then you could find boxes in parking lots of grocery stores to put your newspapers and magazines in, and you would take your cans somewhere, aluminum cans somewhere else to get the funds. So, and one of the things I did after that, well, I guess it was around that time, we helped to write the legislation that was introduced anyway to the state, which they didn't pass, all of the things we had in mind, but that helped to form the legislation that passed to create the recycling programs that we do have in the state back in the 90s. So I've been working on it since then. I took a little break and had some kids, and and then came back to work for the state, where I've been the recycling coordinator for over 5 years now.
Well, Patty, I didn't even realize how much background you had in recycling. Why is recycling so darn important anyway?
Well, to me, the main reason that recycling is important is that we have these resources. And so if we look at it not as a waste product, but that these are resources that we already have they've already been processed into a form that we can use. And so instead of taking all of these materials and throwing them in the landfill and getting new materials, we can take these materials and make new products from them. And so I'm always interested in, conserving our resources that we have. When I first started in this position, one of the things that we do is teacher trainings. And so we were doing a teacher training with the Desert Research Institute, and it was called Follow the Waste Stream. And when I was preparing for that, I was thinking, well, this is kind of a crazy thing. We're taking some waste that, something we don't want anymore, and we're going to follow and see where it goes. So I thought, well, what we should do is go back and see where it came from, this thing that we no longer want. How did we get what we have already? And then, so we don't want to just follow the waste to the landfill. We want to follow it back to where it came from, and maybe that will make us value these things more. I mean, the reason that people want to recycle is that there is value in this material. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, well, someone's getting rich off of our aluminum cans that we're putting in the bin. Well, that's not really true anymore. It's there's a cost to collecting and processing the materials, but they do have a value, and so that, to me, that is the main driver, is that it's not just a value of the materials, but also an economic value to the community and to the state in the number of jobs. There's jobs to be had in collecting and processing the materials, but also designing the products in the first place to make sure that they are recyclable, and designing new products that we can make out of the materials that we collect. So it's the value and and conserving the resources.
Well, Patty, that's very fascinating, and it's a really good way of looking at things. It's not just garbage, it's actually a valuable resource. So thank you for educating us on that. Patty, I'd like to find out how the state of Nevada is doing in its recycling rate, and maybe how it compares with other states.
So the latest data that we have is from 2019. We're still in 2020, so we don't have that data yet, but we've been pretty flat at about 21 to 22% of our waste gets recycled. So the law that we passed back in the 90s, we had a goal of recycling 25% of our waste, and we only have met that goal for 3 years, 2011, 12, and 13. And other than that, since about 2003, we've been hovering around 21, 22% of our waste. The main materials that we recycle in this, because we count composting as a waste diversion. So the main materials that we're diverting from the landfill are scrap metal, paper products, which includes cardboard, and organic materials. And so the main organic materials are, lawn waste and yard waste, tree branches, pine needles. We do a lot of pine needles up at the lake, for example. So those three materials comprise over 90% of the materials that are recycled in the state. And nationally, the rate is about 34%. So looking statewide, we calculate the rate based on 6 of the counties, actually, because according to our regulations, it's the states with the most population that have to do certain things. So Clark County has the highest population, so they actually generate the most waste. So really what happens there greatly affects the rest of the state. And they've been recycling at about 20%. I wrote down some numbers so I wouldn't get it wrong. Douglas County has been the highest, and so their rate was 57% in 2019, and that's due in large part to their organics diversion. So they collect a lot of organic material in Douglas County, and so that helps boost their rate. Whereas like Elko County only recycles about 3% of their waste. And in Washoe County, we're at about the national average, 33%. Carson City, very interestingly, their rate in 2019 was 34%, which was up from 25% the year before, because they instituted curbside collection for single-family homes in the city, and also collection of yard waste. So that really boosted their rate. And that was instituted, about halfway, 1st of July in 2019. So hopefully, their rate will increase when we get a full year of that service in 2020. So, Nevada is a little bit less than the national average, but a lot of other states recycle less than we do. So, I actually think that we are doing pretty well, because the way you look at it, all the recycling that's happening in the state is basically voluntary. People don't have to do this. It's not mandated. So I think 22% is pretty good. We can do better, but only about 2/3 of the households actually have convenient access to recycling. So, Washoe County, for example, has one drop-off center at the transfer station, and up until this year, it wasn't even open on the weekends. So, if you don't live in a single-family home, you don't have very good convenient access to recycling. And in Carson City, the landfill had a drop-off center, and they have closed due to the high rates of contamination. So what I mean by contamination in the recycling stream is just people putting things in there that shouldn't be in the bin, that aren't part of the recycling system, basically. So, people put a lot of things in there that they think, oh, this should be recyclable, and maybe it is, but not in that system. You may have to take, for example, plastic bags. They are recyclable, but we don't want them in the bin because they jam up the machinery down the line at the sorting facility. We can take the plastic bags back to the grocery store or Walmart or other places that collect the plastic bags for recycling.
Well, Patty, that's very fascinating. Tell me, are pizza boxes recyclable?
That is a very interesting question. So they are. And I just received in my mail a flyer from Waste Management, and it said on there, no pizza boxes. So I had just been reading an article in one of the waste journals called Waste Dive, and they said the manufacturers or the paper processors said that pizza boxes are recyclable. So I have a contact at Waste Management, and I asked her, well, what's the deal with pizza boxes? And why do you say that they're not recyclable? And she said, well, they are recyclable, but a lot of times people leave the food waste in the box, pizza crusts or whatever in there. So if you empty it out, then the pizza boxes are recyclable. So that is the kind of thing we mean by contamination. People have to, we want this stuff clean, empty, and dry, basically. So there's always a lot more to any topic than you think.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I was always curious about pizza boxes because I heard you can recycle, you can't recycle. And then I had a big debate with my husband about whether they were recyclable or not. So good to know. So if they're clean, they're recyclable. If they're dirty, they're not.
Yes.
So that's very good, useful information. Well, Patty, I know that you're doing some really exciting things in the state. Can you give us a little hint about some projects you might be working on and how that impacts the community overall?
Things we've actually been working on for quite a while, but is called a hub and spoke model of recycling. And so this is really for the rural areas. So basically, a hub would be larger cities, so say for example, Lovelock or Elko, and then they would other smaller communities would feed their recyclables into the larger hub. So the smaller communities are the spokes. And so what this does is it helps to consolidate high quality material. So a smaller community may not be able to collect enough aluminum or cardboard to make a truckload. But if we had a hub set up that had basic processing and storage facilities, so basically a baler and covered storage, we could collect enough high quality material in a shorter period of time to make it more marketable. So in rural Nevada, and a lot of actually in the western part of the United States, having access to the markets for the materials is the problem, and the distance required to transport the materials. So it costs a lot to collect and process, bale the material and then ship it to somewhere that actually uses that material to make new products. So if we can consolidate the material at a hub, we can have a more convenient to be picked up by, a truck could possibly go down the I-80 corridor and make several stops at, various hubs along the way, and then take a load of plastic bottles, for example, to a processor in California, or somebody, going the other way, there's a glass processor in Utah. So, if we can work together, we can advance our recycling to be more convenient and to be more cost effective, really, is the point. And helping to keep this material out of landfills is important, especially for the smaller communities. So in the larger areas, like Reno Sparks or in Las Vegas, the landfills are owned by private companies. And so these companies invest in the infrastructure for the landfills and the trucks and collection and all of that. Well, in the smaller communities, we don't have that. And the municipalities are the ones who own the landfills. And so there are a lot of regulations as to, how to, the landfill has to be set up and run, and it's costly. And so if we can keep that material, that valuable material out of the landfill, we can extend the life of the landfill, we can reduce the costs to those communities, and, bring in a little revenue as well by the sale of that material. Let's see, another thing we've been working on is helping to support the Nevada Green Business Network. So we help to support. We have a small grant program, and we help to support local initiatives. And so one of the things I'm kind of excited about is the prospect of using reusable containers for takeout food instead of all of this disposables, for example. So if the green dining, Carson City has a green dining district, and if we can get all of the merchants, all the restaurants to use the reusable container for takeout, that could really reduce the amount of waste that's going into the landfills here in Carson City. I think that's an exciting project. Even though it's not our project, it's something that we're supporting and that we would hope to bring to other communities as well.
Well, thank you, Patty. You truly are an expert in recycling. I'd like to know what your vision is for the future of sustainability in the state of Nevada.
Well, we, in our department, our Bureau of Sustainable Materials Management, we have recently written a strategic plan to further the sustainable materials management goals. So we used to call it waste management, but if we think about these things not as wastes, but as resources, then so that's where the sustainable materials management comes in, is that we're thinking of them as not only, that these materials have value further down the line. And so the main premise is that to keep materials in their highest and best use throughout their life cycle. And so if we can change our attitudes and our beliefs and our behaviors as well, then hopefully we can advance these sustainable materials management principles. And so I guess what I like to think of doing is planting seeds and hoping that some of them will grow. And, making people think about what they do every day. When you go to the store, do you want to buy something that's already chopped up in a plastic container, or can you just buy, a whole sweet potato, And we also want to support our local community. So by going to farmers markets or, going to local businesses, we want to support our local economy, to support each other. And so I guess I like to think of myself as just, like I said, someone who plants the seeds and hopes that some of these ideas will take hold. When I go talk to kids, for example, I had a class of fifth graders who wanted to know about, they've heard a lot about plastic pollution in the ocean. And so we were just talking about, how you could change your buying habits to reduce plastic. And so I was telling them, you could actually buy bar soap instead of soap in a bottle, because if you get the liquid soap, you're paying for the water and the plastic bottle and the shipping of all of that, where, if you think about it, a bar of soap has a lot lower impact on the environment. And, just to get the wheels turning and think of, sometimes you even say things and it makes you think, wow, change your own opinion. Like back in the earlier days of my recycling career, I said something like, I don't recycle the cat food cans because they're gross. And I thought, and then I thought later, well, that's so silly. All you have to do is, rinse it out and put it in the recycling bin. So sometimes just saying something to yourself helps you change your own opinion of what's possible.
Well, Patty, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I think you've given everyone some good ideas of what they can do to recycle. I used to think that just having some bins in my garage to recycle plastics and glass and paper was enough, and I'm learning that isn't enough. So part of it is just education. And I think that you're doing a great job educating people across the state of all ages, grade schools, adults, and I've learned so much from you as well. Is there any last thoughts or anything else you would like our audience to know?
Well, I guess the last parting thought is that we don't have to be perfect. And so anything that you can do to help out is helpful, and it all adds up. So, I had a colleague I worked with, and he said he didn't recycle because he lived by himself and he didn't generate that much material. And I said, well, look around your apartment complex. It's like, how many people there live by themselves? And I guess he was more in a townhouse, so they did have recycling access. And so he thought, well, that's true. Okay, so I am just one person, and this is just, all I can do. But if we all think that way, that, well, we're all, part of this greater community, and anything that we can do can help. And so, sometimes we might have to buy that bottle of water if we forgot to bring our reusable bottle. Or, sometimes we forget to say, I don't want those plastic utensils when I get my takeout food. But, everything that we do can have an impact. And so we don't have to be perfect, but if we all do it imperfectly, we're going to make it down that road of sustainability. And that's it. It's a path. It's a process. And, if we just think a little bit more about what it is that we can do, we find out it's really a lot, especially if we work together.
Thank you, Patty, so much for being here today.